How did he show his love? Brother Nasser? Okay, how did his older brothers feel towards Joseph, Sister T? Okay, they hated him. Explain what Joseph dreamed about his sheaf and his brother's sheaves. And Maritza, you're making a face. Do you not know what a sheaf
No,
is?
I don't. I remember what last week when you said it was like the wheat and it was put up like that, the way they used to do
Tell
it.
me about the dream then.
That he dreamt that they all bowed to him, or
Okay.
bowed to his sheaf.
Okay. What did Joseph's brother ask about his dream?
What did they ask? I know what they say about it.
Well, what did they say?
He was crazy.
No.
Yeah.
No. Nobody remembers? What would you say if somebody's going to tell you you're going to bow down to him and use it?
Are we going to bow down?
So you're gonna rule over us?
There you go. So are you're the one that's going to rule over us? You're the baby. Who do you think you are? Okay. And who made Joseph to dream?
God.
God. Okay. Wilmer, you asked about dreams. Why did you ask about dreams and what do you want to know about dreams? I'm not a dream whisperer, so can't tell you.
Rain over us? I'm gonna rain over it.
Okay, in the Old Testament, I think we covered it a little tiny bit. I said in the Old Testament, where there were many dreams that God allowed, and one of the things you can find out if God fulfills them is in Deuteronomy, and we read that. Okay, that if the prophets' words are true, they will be fulfilled. And today, if you dream dreams, sometimes they're dreams, sometimes they are things in our subconscious mind. Can God reveal in that way?
Sure.
If He has to, He will reveal in any way He has to. He will strike people down. He will do what He has to do. But most dreams that we have, they don't come true, and thank God they don't. Okay, Ted, who remembers? No. How do we know? Okay. How do we know that God sent Joseph the dreams?
They came true.
Because they came true. We see the fulfillment of the scripture. Okay, before I go any farther, I wrote it big red letters on my book. Next week, this class over here has set up to have a breakfast. Once again, they've invited us to partake. So see Sister Darla and see Sister Fanny on what you can bring. Don't come to me because I have no clue. All right. Now let us go into our lesson today. Joseph was sold by his brothers. I would like for Martin to stand up and tell me this part of the story like you would tell your children. Why are you laughing? You should know this. You're caught on candy camera.
Camera.
Well, the part would be that Joseph was a son beloved by his father.
No, the part of him being sold by his brothers.
Well, that was my point.
We don't want to get there. We're already past that.
Okay, so he had to go to see his brother, and since they hate him for his dreams, and they knew that his father loved him more than all the rest, they took revenge on him and they stripped from his coat and they put on a pit, and according to they started eating bread. And they saw the Ishmaelite coming around, and one of them said, "Why don't we sell our brother?" And we doesn't have to do with it, you know. So what happened is that they removed him from the pit and sold it, and like Jesus, the same way was sold for some type of silvers.
Would you tell your child in Spanish or English?
English.
I would be so sad.
Okay. Conspired. Okay, sister. I know you're sister to him, so you can talk like that. Okay. What does the word conspired mean? Somebody, anybody in here do not know what the word conspired means? Okay, so since Marisa wants to talk this morning, please tell me. To plot against, to what else, Sister Carla? Okay, to plot against. Plot is the word. You said Spanish?
Yeah.
Okay. What does sackcloth mean? Since these are words that are coming from from the Bible that many times we don't use in our vocabulary today. Wilmer, what does it mean?
It's a clothing used for mourning.
Okay. It was a rough, coarse type of fabric that they put on as a sign of mourning. Everybody knew what it was. All right, how many of you studied your lesson? All right, I want to ask a question. I want to see the hands. There are, what I could figure out, and by studying the lesson, there are 4 steps that the brothers took within themselves before they did the evil deed of selling their brother. Okay, what were the 4 steps? From what I'm hearing mentioned different times, you're skipping one of them. So there's 4 steps in the hearts of the brothers. When you study a lesson like this, we want to get something for us to chew on for ourselves. Correct? We think about Joseph, we think, well, he's gone through this, then I can go through this because this and this and this happened to him. So there's 4 steps in the evildoer's heart. We find the same case will apply to Jesus in his ministry because we skip over some of the things. Now, Miguel is digging his book, so is Brenda. They're all looking because that question they just didn't get when they were studying the lesson for their classes. So they're trying to figure it out. Brother T.
The first step is first, they were out in the field.
No. The 4 steps in their heart
Their heart.
that drove them to do what they did to their brother.
Envy?
Are you talking about from the previous lesson as well, or just?
I'm talking about this.
Oops, sorry.
The first step was hatred. That's the way to go.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah. And then the second one was envy. Work in the same area. And the third one, somebody was jealousy.
4 steps.
Okay, let's go to Miguel. Because you were looking it up, you must have found something. You're being mean this morning.
You know, it all starts in the mind. It starts in the mind, and then it moves into their heart, and then it festered, and then they act upon that was in their heart, which was
Okay, he's putting it in a very ABC manner, very general. Brenda, what is the first one you think happened?
We couldn't
Anyone
hear.
else? She said to me, I think it was hatred. Brother Carlos?
Resentment,
Okay.
seeds of resentment.
Envy? Okay.
That comes before hate.
Yeah, I started with the
Okay. It did not start with hate.
no.
There is a scripture that has been my guidepost all through my Christian life. What is it?
Beware lest the root of bitterness
Spring up within you. Beware lest the root of bitterness spring up within you. And the first thing that they had was they had a bitter attitude that their father liked him better. to me. Okay, you can have your different viewpoints on this and put it at ABC if you want to. That bitterness they allowed to fester. And then that grew into jealousy and envy. Okay, it's one thing to have envy and jealousy. You can kind of get over that and you can ask forgiveness and you can overcome that. But then it developed into what? Hate. And then the hate grew even so strong that it became
Murder.
no. They first
Or plot to
plotted
murder.
and made a lie.
They wanted
They were going to want to do a lie. They planned out something. They plotted something. When you hate someone, you try to get revenge is the word. Okay? Then they fulfilled it. So really there was 4 or 5. But if I think about him and I want to relate it to my life, I know the first thing for me is do not let the root of bitterness spring up within you. In other words, don't get an attitude over anything or anybody, because that right away will start something in you. And these brothers, they got an attitude. Now, don't we see that a lot of times in families? How siblings will have an attitude towards others, and if they're not careful, it makes a distance. All right, how many of you have more than 2 children? 3 children? You all know that when you have children like that, there's an attitude between them. What happens? They begin to get cold to each other. They begin to fight. They begin to argue. So we even as adults, as parents, and look upon our children and look upon others, we have to be so careful with bitterness. We do not allow it to spring up in us, because it will lead to other things. And Joseph was sold. Do I have to go into the whole story of Joseph being sold? So I will. Brother Carlos, Genesis 37:13 or 12. Go ahead.
I think also before the hate and before the resentment that came before the hate. Before the resentment, I think there was a lot of thinking going on.
The mind.
And thinking and also talking. You'll notice the dialogue between the brothers. They were talking among themselves, and the more you talk about something and think about it, the bigger it gets. So it's like,
It wasn't there before, right?
yeah, it's like of the 4 issues, there was like a 0.5, and then a 0.7 and 8, and then it starts growing, and then finally you get resentment, and then you get 1, and then
Everything
hate.
grows. All of these evil things, just like the good in a person, if it's developed, it will grow. But all evil things will produce even greater evil things. That's the reason why we always say, and those that have been serving God for a long time, you will say that, others that haven't served God that long, that when you sin against God, your sins will take you deeper and deeper and deeper. Because it's not just one, it's going to be the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and you begin, as the Bible says, your heart becomes calloused, and you don't have any sense of consciousness anymore of the evil that you're doing, because it's just evil. And this is, to a certain degree, the way these brothers got. Yeah, I'm sure they had a lot of conversations out in the field. Joseph was the subject every time they gathered around, because they resented him highly. Okay, in Genesis 37:12, and his brother went to feed their flocks. And Israel said unto Joseph, do thy brethren feed the flocks in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said unto him, here am I. All right, what does this show you? Come on in. Hi, Kayla, how are you? It says, Joseph, and he said unto him, here am I. What does that show you about Joseph right there? He was subject to his father, but there was something else. Dig a little deeper.
He didn't fear his brother.
He said, here am I. What did you say, Brother Jesus? Not necessarily. He had already had run-ins with his brothers. Yet he says, here am I. What does that show you about Joseph? He, to a certain degree, he was innocent in the fact.
He wasn't working.
Huh?
Like he wasn't working like the rest. He would just be home.
His mindset was not vengeance or he wasn't going to do like the rest of the. Oh, yeah, I know you mean working like in the.
Like he
fields,
was
the
home
rest. He was
rather
home.
than.
But his answer to his father, here am I. In other words, you're sending me to the wolves. His brothers. He knew how his brothers felt about him. But yet there was such a willingness in Joseph to do what he was asked to do. And especially coming from the authority of his father. And that many times God will speak to us and tell us to do things, and we think to ourselves, me, go there, or me, talk to that one. Look at what they've done, look at what they've said, look at how they treat me, blah, 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 blah. And we back off. That's a human nature, right? But God, when God speaks, as Jacob spoke to his son, when God speaks to us, we should be like Samuel was. Here am I. Here am I. We don't know where the end's going to be, but here am I. And I'm willing to go. I know it's dangerous out there, but I'm still going to go. And I'm still going to do. Joseph knew he was going to face his brothers. They didn't like him. They had very well told him, who do you think you are? We're going to kneel down to you? So, listen to even what the brothers said. And he said to him, go, I pray thee, whether it is well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out to the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in a field. And the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, they are departed from thence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren, and found them in Dothan. Okay. Could Joseph have given up?
Yes.
He could have gone back home and said, I couldn't find them, Dad. They weren't where you said they were supposed to be. But yet, he wanted to fulfill that was commanded of him. Think of Jesus as we are comparing many things. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, take this cup from me. But yet, he knew what the cup was going to take, and he was willing to take it. But I'm sure Joseph stood there and says, go home, where my warm bed is, or go to the altar. So what did he do? And the Bible says, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto him, they conspired against him to slay him. So what was he walking into? The lion's den. He was walking into, as David said, a trap. And they said to one another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Joseph had to have sensed. He couldn't have been so naive and so...
I'm sure their faces were so...
Yeah, he had to know his brother were not happy with him. So here we hear them from afar saying, this scripture writes it, now come, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into a pit. And we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dream. Okay, now we see really the spirit of the brothers. This evil that was in the heart has now taken form. And this is, help me if I'm right, tell me if I'm wrong. The scripture that says, in the heart, about the heart hiding secrets, or the evil in the heart, whatever it is. I can't remember now. But in the heart was their evil.
So
Nobody saw it.
they're
From the heart comes evil thoughts.
The issues of the heart. Okay? Their heart was evil. Maybe all their helpers didn't know what the brothers were talking about. Their other servants may not have known. Because remember, these were servants of Jacob. So they would have probably protected the son. But these are the brothers that are doing this. Now their evil is made manifest. Okay. Maritza, do you want me to ask you a question this morning? Okay. If there is evil in the heart, can I see it? Maritza?
If there's evil in the heart, can you see it? Me, my opinion, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't.
Okay. Most of the time, if I was to come up to the brothers and start talking to them, unless they brought up the subject of Joseph, I would not know, right?
Sometimes you can, sometimes
So
yeah.
you don't always know what's in the heart. But the evil will manifest itself somehow, some way. It will come out. Yes, Miguel?
One thing I would always tell my children, in conversation with that same thing that you just don't know people, you don't know the evil or the darkness that lies in a person's heart. You know, you really can't tell. And always. So when you think you befriend someone, you really don't know who you're befriending. You know, and that's not just for our kids when they're growing up, but all of us. We may think, oh, how pleasant, how nice. I mean, talking about the evil of the heart, you know, but we just don't really know the darkness and the evil that lies in that person's heart. And how many people have engaged in a relationship with someone, a male, female, and later on they find, you know, this person just has them and it is destructive to them because they thought they were deceived, you know, by what they saw on the exterior, but they didn't know what was lying beneath the exterior.
So how are we going to find out what is in a person's heart? As God's child, and I have met someone, and I am talking to them, befriending them, as he says. How am I going to find out, Sister Marisa, what is in that person's heart?
God gives us discernment, one, and two, the Spirit knows when you're God's child and you have another spirit that is not the same. If you're truly filled with the Spirit, you can sense it. You may not see it, you may not know it, but there's something inside of you that the Spirit and God will show you.
What's the scripture for that one? Our spirit bears witness. Bears witness. It'll bear witness. That is why there are people, personally, that I have met, and actually when I shook their hand, they gave me goat chills. I just felt repugnance from them. There are people I will not socialize with because they make my skin crawl in that sense. Because the spirit is not right. It's just not right. And maybe I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but I just know that it's just clashing with what spirit I have, the Spirit of God. Therefore, that leads me to something else for you and me. And it's not that we're jumping around all the things, but this is the lessons we get drawn from this, is the evil that is in the heart, is the fact that if we truly seek God's face and have an intimate experience with Him through our prayer, our daily reading, our meditating on Him and letting Him speak to us, He will give us that we need to be able to discern the spirits, to protect us, and to know our limit on how far we can go to help them. Because yes, there are a soul that is in darkness, or there are a soul with a need, but we need to minister just to that need and not minister to being a friend where it could pull us away or affect us or make us blind. Because some people do have a spirit that they can, I call it, they have the gift to gab, and they can convince you of anything and you will become blinded. So God gives us this protecting spirit, I believe, because we have His Spirit and He helps us to discern what others possess. So therefore, Joseph's brothers to other people may have been just fine. The other herdsmen, he said to him, oh, they've gone on to so-and-so. So he had communication with them. He knew where they went. He didn't think anything different. But their heart was not right. And when it came to that one person, he was not right. Yes, Miguel?
And I don't mean to get off topic, but just to add to what you were saying, you know, the discernment is there, but also the wisdom. Because maybe we're not always able to discern, but knowing that the devil himself can disguise himself as an angel of light to deceive. God teaches us to be cautious. We get to know somebody and we think, you know, we could be deceived. We could think, yeah, they're honest, sincere, they're the best thing. But, you know, we are taught to be very careful, to try the spirits, but to be cautious because, you know, we may not be able to discern exactly everything, but by having God's wisdom to know that we need to tread lightly until we really are able to determine what's going on
What
with that
scripture
person.
would you base yourself on that?
Well, the one I just mentioned is the devil able to, you know, transform himself into an angel of light to deceive us.
Okay. One that I used a lot when I would work at the altar was, it says, don't lay your hands lightly on anyone. And the reason why I did that was because my spirit was telling me something's wrong. And secondly, I distinctly remember one she was a very attractive young woman. She was very petite. And she came to the altar. My husband sent me to deal with her. And I didn't lay hands on her. I usually, when I pray with someone, I will, hold their hand or hold them by the shoulder or whatever the need be. And I just couldn't. I just couldn't. Later on, she kept coming back to services. And she was one that was so full of demons, it took 4 men to hold her down. She became so violent. And the devil. And so I remember distinctly my husband was rebuking the devil, casting it out. And she opened her eyes and looked up at him and says, all 4 of them says, it's gone, it's gone. I'm gone, it's gone. Something like that. She said Spanish. And Alice says, you devil, you're not gone yet. And there she started again. And because it was, you remember that, Charlie?
Double line.
Back over 130 years ago. Christine, I think it was. But the thing is that you look at cases. We had cases, some cases like that, but they were not that common. But the thing is that God does protect us because we're His people. But at the second time, we can give them help. But you're going to have more of God in you than that person's got of evil. And in the case of Joseph, Joseph had so much of Jehovah, not in him, but with him, because God was going to use him, that no matter what all we see that Joseph is going through, they plot to kill him, then they decided to throw him in a pit, then they decided, we're going to sell him now as a slave, so they pull him up, they take off his robe, and then they give him to be as a slave, and they're done with him. All this evil is being done to Joseph, a man that is going to be used of God, and that God has His hand on. And you say, well, why did he have to go through all of this? Because God had a plan. And even though many times we see the evil, God has a plan, because God would that none would be lost. And the plan in the end was for what? To save his brothers, the one that was doing evil to him. So many times we wonder, why does God carry us this path, or do this, or do that, do the other? It's because God has a plan on to reach souls, not just us as He protected, but others too. This is what we have to keep in mind. We're not living just for ourselves. Joseph wasn't that child just for himself and to be the head of the tribe, etc., etc. No, Joseph was chosen because God wanted him to use him, and he was the willing vessel. I ask myself, as Joseph, am I the willing vessel to be used of God? I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what the future holds. You say, well, you're 70, almost 70. You don't have much future. Still got a future, maybe more than yours. But the thing is, God can use it, no matter what. Right, Brother T? Now, Charlie, I'm sorry.
I was thinking that along those lines of God looking at the various events in Joseph's life, he had the long-term view, the panoramic view, because the Lord, being the everlasting God, He can see the panoramic view, and we can only see a tiny little scene or something, and that's why our understanding is limited. So it's almost like Joseph saved his brethren being saved from famine and being destroyed, starving to death where they were. He saved the Jewish people. The Jewish people propagated. You have the 12 tribes, and then you have the Jewish people expanding throughout Palestine, and then you have the scribes and Pharisees coming out of that segment of the Jewish population who were trained and reared from they were little to translate, or not translate, but to make copies, handheld copies of leather parchments and on other scrolls and things. And look, today we have the King James. So all along, throughout the history, you see God having that panoramic view. And I think it goes right down to each of us as individuals. And right down to the Lord saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. You, specifically. So it's more than just, oh, Joseph way back there in history. It's me and you and everyone else. One day standing in front of the Son of God, look at all he did. And so I'm like super excited about that.
I like what you're bringing up in the fact that I like to bring it to ourselves. And once again, I ask my class. Some of you are not got wrinkles, but they're headed that way. But the point is that what am I going to do to leave something behind that there will be a panoramic view? Or will there only be just a few slides of me in my life? Because I live for myself and I just made it to heaven. But have I done and worked for God and given to God and been for God that it would live on? I was thinking the other day, okay, when I die, then there's Marisa, then she's going to die, and then there's Ali. And then Ali and Nathaniel, and I'm thinking about them and thinking about their blood. And I was thinking on and on the generations that would go that would carry my blood, thinking of myself. First I think of my mother, and then I think of myself. And I think, what is going to become? Have I embedded, or have I done enough in my, as Alex used to say, we all have our own little kingdoms, our homes, our family, our acquaintances, those are our kingdoms. Have I done enough in my little kingdom to embed enough of the gospel and the truth and what God can do and what God can produce into my daughter, that she can embed it into her children and that they can grasp it and see and have a vision of that it could be then into their blood that would go on to serve God? And I was in my mind just visualizing and thinking all that, and already I'm praying for the third or fourth generation, that they may be saved, and I don't even know if they'll ever be born. But the thing is that we need to have a vision to a certain degree, like God does. That it's not gonna. It shouldn't stop with you and me. It shouldn't stop there. It has to go on through our fruit somehow, some way, so that others can be reached by the gospel. Because we're living in a world like Joseph was living. He felt like probably when he was down in Egypt, which we will get to, he was all by himself. But yet he knew who he believed. We know who we believe, and we're living in a world where we see things that, right now we live in America. America is Christian, considered Christian. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is being taught, being preached, being shared, being read all over. But then we have millions, I don't know about billions, but we have millions and millions of people that don't know the gospel, that haven't heard it, they've never read it. They don't understand it. They may have heard it but don't understand it. And it is our job to make sure that whoever we reach, that they will know. And that's what Joseph did. Even though he didn't know what was ahead of him in his fiery furnace, he did know one thing, that he was obedient to those that had command over him. He did as his father said. Did he have a choice with his brothers? No. But I just don't see Joseph throwing a fit and screaming and yelling. I think he did. He just gave his Lord, I'm in your hands. Oh God, Jehovah, I don't know what's next, but I have no control in the situation, so I might as well just go. And whatever befalls me, you're still in control. I believe that Joseph had that kind of upbringing and that kind of depth in him. So what happened to these brothers? This morning as I read over the lesson once again, there's something that struck a chord in me, and that was the sin that they carried. Hate, envy, jealousy, murder, lying. They thought that it was going to be solved by doing what?
Getting rid of the problem.
Getting rid of the problem. So they got rid of him. They dunked the thing in blood, took it to the father. The father mourns. Always the father was mourning. He never stopped mourning for his son. That's what the scripture says. But the thing is, they thought the problem was over and done. But it wasn't. Because they carried the guilt within them. Always. So this brings me to the hidden sin. The hidden sin, you can't get rid of unless God forgives you. and you make it known to him. And they were carrying this. That's why they were so willing to send Benjamin later on down to Egypt. We'll get ahead of our story with Joseph, but you can see the pattern later on why they did things. They were feeling guilt in their conscience, because sin will always bring suffering. Sin will always bring grief, no matter what, no matter how little. Okay, can we measure sin? Christian, can we measure sin? No. Why?
There's hidden sins that only God knows. So
Okay. Sin is sin, right? So what is sin? A willful transgression against the law of God, period. No matter what it may be. So therefore, no matter what kind of sin it is sin. Therefore, once again, we come back to the fact that Joseph, being a type of Jesus Christ, he didn't have the hate, he didn't have the bitterness, he didn't have the envy, he didn't have the strife. He was, as Brother T said, he was innocent. And he was like Christ in the sense that he was hated by his brothers. Christ was hated by those around him. And he was hated by people, but you know why he was hated? Because he told them that they were sinners. That's why Jesus was. And Joseph was hated because he told them also of their condition and what was going to happen. Brother T?
You know what always gets everything when you talk about Joseph is the brothers all through their life, right, for many years, and they never break down and confess well.
No.
Never. But again, we always said that the brothers then. If you remember, two brothers, well, Benjamin was home, so he don't know what happened. Well, he was young. But Reuben didn't know that they sold the brother, because he didn't want to protect him.
Exactly.
That's why he even said, put him down there, you know. And remember, he came back later to take him out.
That's when he rent his clothes and put on some, and
That's right.
grieving for him.
Yes, you know,
But
so he did.
what happened to him though? He did something that Benjamin didn't do. Reuben did.
Oh, well, you mean
With the brothers. He came complicit to their deeds. And he didn't tell on them. He didn't tell on them.
No, I think, as I read the story, those brothers were vicious. And I think they would kill him too.
Well, they seem to show signs of it, brothers.
Oh, yeah,
that's funny.
and that's why he
Became complicit.
he said that to be quiet.
I don't think
I
Benjamin.
never thought about it that way.
I don't think Benjamin was involved with.
No, he said Benjamin wasn't. That's why it was the difference between.
Well, I mean, he was too young to even be.
Yeah, he said Benjamin was at home, but Reuben, then he became complicit, but then he said something I'd never ever thought. That's very good, brother, because these brothers were evil. They were evil, and then he comes back, and the way that he grieved over him, you're right, the way that he grieved over him is that he wished it hadn't happened, because he was secretly going to send him back home. So now he's stuck. He's stuck. I really am glad that I wasn't a sister to them or a brother. Because who was it that pointed out, I think it was you, Wilmer, that pointed out in one of the lessons previously, in the last lesson, where they had been, what they had done because of their sister had been abused of you, or not got wrinkles, but they're headed that way. But the point is that what am I going to do to leave something behind that there will be a panoramic view? Or will there only be just a few slides of me in my life? Because I live for myself and I just made it to heaven. But have I done and worked for God and given to God and been for God that it would live on? I was thinking the other day, okay, when I die, then there's Marisa, then she's going to die, and then there's I. and then Ali and Nathaniel, and I'm thinking about them and thinking about their blood. And I was thinking on and on the generations that would go that would carry my blood, thinking of myself. First I think of my mother, and then I think of myself. And I think, what is going to become? Have I embedded, or have I done enough in my, as Alex used to say, we all have our own little kingdoms, our homes, our family, our acquaintances, those are our kingdoms. Have I done enough in my little kingdom to embed enough of the gospel and the truth and what God can do and what God can produce into my daughter, that she can embed it into her children, and that they can grasp it and see and have a vision of that it could be then into their blood that would go on to serve God? And I was in my mind just visualizing and thinking all that, and already I'm praying for the third or fourth generation, that they may be saved, and I don't even know if they'll ever be born. But the thing is that we need to have a vision to a certain degree, like God does. That it's not gonna. It shouldn't stop with you and me. It shouldn't stop there. It has to go on through our fruit somehow, some way, so that others can be reached by the gospel. Because we're living in a world like Joseph was living. He felt like probably when he was down in Egypt, which we will get to, he was all by himself. But yet he knew who he believed. We know who we believe, and we're living in a world where we see things that, right now we live in America. America is Christian, considered Christian. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is being taught, being preached, being shared, being read all over. But then we have millions, I don't know about billions, but we have millions and millions of people that don't know the gospel, that haven't heard it, they've never read it. They don't understand it. They may have heard it but don't understand it. And it is our job to make sure that whoever we reach, that they will know. And that's what Joseph did. Even though he didn't know what was ahead of him in his fiery furnace, he did know one thing, that he was obedient to those that had commanded him. He did as his father said. Did he have a choice with his brothers? No. But I just don't see Joseph throwing a fit and screaming and yelling. I think he did. He just gave he said, Lord, I'm in your hands. Oh God, Jehovah, I don't know what's next, but I have no control in the situation, so I might as well just go. And whatever befalls me, you're still in control. I believe that Joseph had that kind of upbringing and that kind of depth in him. So what happened to these brothers? This morning, as I read over the lesson once again, there's something that struck a chord in me, and that was the sin that they carried. Hate, envy, jealousy, murder, lying. They thought that it was going to be solved by doing what?
Getting rid of the problem.
Getting rid of the problem. So they got rid of him. They dunked the thing in blood, took it to the father. The father mourns. Always the father was mourning. He never stopped mourning his son. That's what the scripture says. But the thing is, they thought the problem was over and done. But it wasn't. Because they carried the guilt within them. Always. So this brings me to the hidden sin. The hidden sin, you can't get rid of unless God forgives you and you make it known to Him. And they were carrying this. That's why they were so willing to send Benjamin later on down to Egypt. We'll get ahead of our story with Joseph, but you can see the pattern later on why they did things. They were feeling guilt in their conscience. Because sin will always bring suffering. Sin will always bring grief, no matter what, no matter how little. Okay, can we measure sin? Christian, can we measure sin? No. Why?
There's hidden sins that only God knows. So.
Okay, sin is sin, right? So what is sin? A willful transgression against the law of God, period. No matter what it may be. So therefore, No matter what kind of sin it is sin. Therefore, once again, we come back to the fact that Joseph, being a type of Jesus Christ, he didn't have the hate, he didn't have the bitterness, he didn't have the envy, he didn't have the strife. He was, as Brother T said, he was innocent. And he was like Christ in the sense that he was hated by his brothers. Christ was hated by those around him. And he was hated by people, but you know why he was hated? Because he told them that they were sinners. That's why Jesus was. And Joseph was hated because he told them also of their condition and what was going to happen. Brother T?
You know what always gets every time we talk about Joseph is the brothers all through their life, right, for many years, and they never break down and confess well.
No.
Never. But again, we always said that the brothers thing. If you remember, two brothers, well, Benjamin was home, so he don't know what happened. Well, he was young. But Reuben didn't know that they sold the brother because he didn't want to protect him.
Exactly.
That's why he even said, put him down there, you know. I remember he came back later to take him out.
And that's when he rent his clothes and put on some, and he was grieving for him.
Yes, yeah, so,
But-
so he didn't.
But what happened to him though? He did something that Benjamin didn't do. Reuben did.
Oh, you mean
With the brothers. He came complicit to their deeds. And he didn't tell on them. He didn't tell on them.
No, I think, as I read the story, those brothers were bishops. And I think they would kill him too.
Well, they seem to show signs of it, brothers.
Oh, yeah,
That's funny.
and that's why he
Became complicit.
he said that he was quiet.
I don't think
I
Benjamin.
never thought about it that way.
I don't think Benjamin was involved with.
No, he said Benjamin wasn't. That's why it was the difference between.
Well, I mean, he was too young to even be.
Yeah, he said Benjamin was at home, but Reuben, then he became complicit, but then he said something I never ever thought. That's very good, brother, because these brothers were evil. They were evil, and then he comes back, and the way that he grieved over him, you're right, the way that he grieved over him is that he wished it hadn't happened because he was secretly going to send him back home. So now he's stuck. He's stuck. I really am glad that I wasn't a sister to them or a brother. Because who was it that pointed out, I think it was you, Wilmer, that pointed out in one of the lessons previously, in the last lesson, where they had been, what they had done because of their sister had been abused.